It was a quiet Saturday morning. My husband was in the other room on his computer. He teaches a morning class and usually spends that time preparing or squeezing in a quick workout. I was in the living room, curled up on the couch, casually playing with a Tamagotchi app on my iPad. Nothing out of the ordinary. The apartment was calm, just the low hum of everyday life. Then, without warning, the stereo sitting across from me clicked on. Now, this stereo isn't one of those smart, voice-activated things. It's old school, physical buttons, an LED screen, basic. Still, I didn't think too much of it at first. My husband sometimes streams music to it from his computer when he's working out, so I assumed he had just turned it on remotely. A soft girl's voice came through the speakers, not singing, just speaking. "Hi, my name is," I think she said Katie, or maybe Kaylee. I wasn't fully paying attention. She continued in a calm, matter-of-fact tone. "I'm years old. I'm from Saha." That part was a blur. I wasn't focusing. I figured it was some weird spoken word indie track my husband had found. He's into that kind of stuff sometimes. Still, something felt off. It wasn't just the voice. It was how flat and emotionless it sounded, like she was reciting information from memory, like a school project or a testimonial. But what really made me freeze was what came next. "Something's hurting me." I blinked and looked up from my iPad. The voice had changed. Same girl, but now there was a tremble in her tone, a quiet panic starting to build. "Something's killing me. Something killed me." My stomach dropped. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I slowly got up from the couch, staring at the stereo like it might explain itself if I looked hard enough. The girl's voice continued, growing more desperate. "Please, someone tell my parents, tell the teachers, tell the corrections officer." As soon as I heard that, corrections officer, I completely lost it. I bolted into the other room, furious, yelling at my husband. "What the hell are you playing? You think this is funny? We don't joke about dead people." He just stared at me, totally confused, like I'd lost my mind. I was still shaking, trying to explain what I heard through panicked, angry breaths. And when I finally calmed down enough to get the words out, about the voice, the message, the stereo, his face changed. He told me it wasn't possible, that he hadn't turned the stereo on, that he hadn't been playing anything at all. I didn't believe him, not at first, so he took me back into the living room to prove it. And that's when I noticed the stereo wasn't even plugged in. It wasn't connected to anything, no power, no cords, nothing. We stood there in silence. I kept trying to come up with a rational explanation. Maybe it picked up a stray signal, an audiobook, a podcast. Maybe the iPad sent something through Bluetooth. But I knew that stereo, and none of those things could explain how a dead, unplugged machine suddenly came to life and played a message like that. I never heard the voice again. We left the stereo.
Several years ago, I lived in a large, empty house completely by myself. It wasn't a place I chose. It was a perk of my job, part of a hiring package offered by my boss, who lived out of state. In return for keeping an eye on the property, I got to live there rent-free. It was a win-win, or so I thought at the time. At first, everything seemed fine. The house was big, quiet, and a bit too spacious for one person, but I got used to it. For the first few months, I stuck mostly to the downstairs area. I set up my bedroom, office, and living space all on the first floor, and rarely ventured upstairs. There was no need to. The upper level was mostly empty bedrooms and a few unfinished spaces. Then winter arrived. It started subtly, just small sounds here and there. Late at night, while I was working at my computer, I began to hear faint bumps and knocks from directly above me. I tried to write it off as the house settling in the cold, or maybe animals on the roof. But over time, those harmless bumps evolved into something else. Distinct, deliberate footsteps pacing across the second floor. They always started in the same place, moved down the hall, and stopped just above where I sat. One night, I decided to go upstairs to check it out. I took a flashlight with me. The second floor was always colder than the first, and the air up there felt heavier, like the stillness in the room was watching me back. There was one room in particular I never liked. It was a kind of oversized walk-in closet attached to one of the guest bedrooms, completely unfinished, with exposed beams and insulation. It also connected to a narrow attic space above the garage. Pitch black, no lighting, no windows, just a void. That night, when I reached the top of the stairs, the door to that unfinished room was wide open. I hadn't been up there in weeks. I shut the door and locked it. 2 nights later, the noises returned. This time, the footsteps were unmistakable. They started inside that room, where I had locked the door, and traveled toward the upstairs bathroom. Then, silence. When I went back up to check, the door was open again. I locked it a second time. Hours later, I found it cracked open. No matter how many times I closed it, locked it, even wedged it shut, the door would find a way to open. Eventually, I pushed a heavy bed frame against it, hoping brute force would do what locks could not. That finally kept the door shut, mostly. But every so often, I'd still find it unlocked. Not open, just waiting. The house grew more unnerving as time passed. The noises weren't just limited to the upstairs anymore. I began hearing footsteps down the main hallway, the creak of floorboards in rooms I wasn't in, and occasionally a sharp, unexplained thump that shook the silence like a warning. One morning, I was in the bathroom taking a shower when I heard soft tapping like fingertips moving up and down the hall just outside the door. It went on for minutes. Slow, deliberate taps. I stood frozen, shampoo still in my hair, heart racing. I never saw anything when I stepped out, but I stopped showering in the mornings after that. After nearly a year, I had enough. I moved out. The company sent another employee to replace me in the house. He lasted a month. We met for coffee after he moved out. He was pale, tired, and visibly shaken. He told me that one morning, while shaving in the upstairs bathroom, he heard a loud slam, like someone had dropped a heavy stack of books right outside his bedroom. Then came the footsteps. Fast, heavy, running down the hallway. But when he opened the door, no one was there. He packed up and left later that same day. Refused to spend another night in the house. Since then, no one from the company has agreed to live there. It's been sitting vacant for years. There's nothing wrong with the house on paper. No tragic history we could find, no past crime, no reason for it to feel the way it does. But if you ask anyone who's lived in it, they'll all tell you the same thing. That house doesn't want you there, and eventually it finds a way to show you.
When I was little, I used to take naps upstairs in our old house. It was quiet up there, tucked away from the rest of the world. But by the time I turned 8, I refused, absolutely refused, to go upstairs for any reason unless I had no choice. The upstairs was strange. It had 2 long crawl-space-like closets that stretched the full length of the attic, maybe 30 feet long, one on each side of the room. They were dark, narrow, and smelled faintly of dust and old wood. As kids, we thought of them as secret passageways, mysterious and adventurous. One afternoon, a friend came over. Like all curious kids, we decided to crawl through one of the attic closets with flashlights, exploring like we were in some hidden fort. We were laughing, just being kids, until we weren't. As we neared the far end of the crawl space, my flashlight caught something that made my skin go cold. A girl, sitting quietly in the corner. She didn't look threatening. She looked normal, maybe 7 or 8, like us. Blonde hair, a pale blue dress, her hands resting in her lap. She smiled as if she wanted to play, but everything about her felt wrong. I didn't speak. I didn't scream. I just stared. My friend kept crawling ahead, unaware of what I saw. I followed him out silently, heart pounding. When we were out, I told him what I'd seen. He went pale, said he hadn't seen anyone, but admitted he suddenly felt like he didn't want to go back in. After that day, things started happening. My parents would send me upstairs to grab something, and every time, without fail, I would see the closet doors slowly swing open, by themselves, always gently, almost like they were inviting me inside. Toys would go missing, not just misplaced, gone. Weeks or months later, they'd show up again in the attic when my parents pulled down the ladder to grab Christmas decorations. They'd laugh it off. I didn't. By the time I was 8, I'd had enough. One morning, determined to face whatever was in that attic, I leashed up our dog, our fearless bark-at-everything retriever, and tried to coax him upstairs. We made it to the top step. He wouldn't go 1 inch farther. He growled once, whimpered, and backed away. I wasn't brave enough to go alone. My parents never believed me. The lights left on upstairs. Must have been me. Toys scattered. Also me. Even when I swore I hadn't been up there in days, they'd shake their heads and scold me. The worst part, I started to question myself. We moved out of that house when I was 10. I didn't look back. Then, just a week later, the new owners called. My parents answered, laughed, thought it was funny. But when they hung up, they were a little quieter than usual. The new owners had a daughter. She had started sleeping upstairs, and almost immediately, she told them she'd been playing at night with a blonde-haired girl. A nice girl, friendly, wore a blue dress. My parents brushed it off as a kid's overactive imagination, but the calls kept coming. The girl, the one from the attic, started showing up in other parts of the house. The family told us they'd catch glimpses of her while watching TV, sometimes just sitting nearby. Once, they swore they saw her sitting on their daughter's lap. Eventually, they did some research on the house, looked up past owners. One name stood out, a dressmaker who had lived there decades before. They found a faded black and white photograph online, a little girl, blonde hair, blue dress, wearing one of the handmade designs her mother used to sew.